Hello and welcome to the Friday morning briefing with Heart Standard. I'm James Cairney and today I'm joined by Scott McIntosh, also known as Amoroso Lets It Run on Twitter. How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, I'm very good. Thanks very much for having me on, James.
No, it's an absolute pleasure having you on. But I guess obviously we're going to be looking ahead to the game at Ibrox this weekend. And looking ahead to how Hearts can maybe hurt Celtic, what needs to change, what they need to do in order to get a positive result. But before we get into all that, because we've got Scott on, we'd be remiss not to get him to speak about what was happening earlier on this week. So you took the initiative to organise a kind of fans forum earlier in the week. So why don't you just tell us a wee bit just about how that worked and what was kind of discussed during that?
Yeah, so I suppose the sort of incentive behind it was to try and sort of plug these gaps that tend to appear during challenging times for a football club, and when comms tend to sort of drop off a little bit in terms of official comms from either the club itself or from the foundation. I do always have to acknowledge that when you try and create something like this or start something like this up in the middle of a bad run, you're going to fall foul of sort of recency bias. So a lot of the questions are going to be dictated by current form, which can naturally create a bit more of a challenging or even at times sort of toxic atmosphere. So I kind of done that with all those things in mind. And at the start, it was very much just woke up on Monday, thought it was a good idea, and felt that the real benefit of it was just giving people a different platform to maybe vent amongst fellow fans, and it could just be a bit of a sort of cathartic experience, if that makes sense. What then happened was that a couple of foundation Hearts members sort of offered their services to get on board, which was great, and I think that was a good step from them to sort of try and be transparent with the fans. I think in a perfect world, you would have that scenario maybe close season, maybe when there's a chance to ask questions that are more pertinent to the sort of foundation, rather than trying to get answers from foundation directors on performance related issues. So that was a bit of a challenge throughout the call. We tried to sort of answer as much as we can, and there was some little bits of information given regarding pledger numbers, issues with trying to attract sort of interaction and engagement with certain demographics. I think under 30s was a very key one. I think one of the key stats that came out from Monday night was centering around that engagement, where our last survey that was carried out with the foundation was back at the start of this calendar year, and there was a 50% response rate from over 8,000 members, which is great. But the problem is, out of that 50%, only 9 were under the age of 30. And that's not 9%, that's just 9 people.
Oh,
so that's
wow, right.
that's really troubling, and I think this goes back to a problem that the foundation were always going to have to encounter at some stage. When the foundation was created, it was off the back of there was urgency. There was a lot of consequence. If we don't do this, the consequences were they were very straightforward. There wouldn't be a club moving forward. I think now we're at a stage where there is a lot of positive things going on commercially in the background. There's also some other bits and pieces that maybe do need to be challenged. But I think because the club are on a decent, even keel financially, where does that sort of urgency come from, and how do you sort of translate that urgency to people who were maybe only 6, 7, 8 or 9 when everything was kicking off 10 years ago? So I think that's probably one of the sort of biggest talking points that came from Monday. But hopefully it's seen as a bit of a stepping stone to moving on to sort of this being a regular thing. I think that if you were to do this on a month-to-month basis, it would then give the foundation an opportunity to have conversations with fans when the club are in a sort of upturn of form, which means that the focus can then be more based on positive aspects of what's happening off the park, and it'll give them a chance to maybe get their point across regarding some of the sort of schemes that they're trying to come up with as well over the next few months. It's very difficult for that to really make a mark with people when there's so much noise about the performance related concerns that fans have just now. So there were certainly risks to holding it, but there was certainly a sort of a positive to take from it as well. So it's something I'd like to see in future. Hopefully it's something the foundation can maybe take now and maybe run the ball with. If I'm being completely honest, I'm not a professional, and I'm probably not the person they need to be doing this on a regular basis, but I'd be more than happy to see them sort of take the ball and run, because I do think it brings benefits, and it hopefully would spark a bit of engagement with the fans moving forward.
No, definitely. Like you say, I think it sounds like it's something that is required. I mean, that's amazing. That statistic about 9 of that 50% being in that demographic. That's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, no, I mean, I think it sounds like it was a good thing to have set up. It sounds like it was quite constructive, and like you say, hopefully it does become a regular thing. So because I think just increased communication never hurts in basically any walk of life. I think just these kind of things.
It's one less thing that the fans can throw at you when things go wrong off the park.
That as well.
Firefighting, lack of comms alongside the football performance. So for me, it's an easy win just to have that constant dialogue. And again, if you do it monthly, you'll then have opportunities to do it when the atmosphere can be a bit more positive as well. You're always in bother if you're just reacting to poor form. It's always going to lead to questions being very narrowed and sort of focused, maybe too tunnel vision basically on the performance side of things. So that's why I think it would be good to sort of keep it running if they can.
No, absolutely. Well, speaking of easy wins, obviously Celtic had one of those at Tynecastle at the weekend. But hey, thank you. I guess we'll start
there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So I guess obviously, Rangers coming up. Rangers at Ibrox. There was obviously the 2-2 draw there at the end of last season when Naismith was interim manager. Do you think does that hold much sway going into this one? Does that matter, or have things changed so much both at Hearts and Rangers since then?
I think given that Rangers had little to play for that night rather than pride, I don't know if there's really a lot of stock that you can buy into it. Naturally, now they've got a change of manager as well, and I think in some key areas, particularly up top, changing personnel. So I don't know how much you can really take in terms of heart from that, which I as fans just now, we want to try and sort of maybe hang on any positive that we can take, and maybe some fans are looking at that result as a potential positive. But for me, too much has changed, in particular from a Rangers point of view, to really sort of use that as any kind of key analysis with Sunday in mind.
No, I'm tempted to agree, because like you say, Rangers, massive chunks of their first teams changed over the summer. Even look at the Hearts team; a lot of them have came and gone. That's a lot of these players. This will be their first trip to Ibrox. So yeah, I think you're right. But I mean, I do think that there is a little bit of encouragement to be had there from the fact that Naismith has he's been there and he has got a decent result there in a place where it's a very difficult venue to go to. So like I think so maybe some of the players that have been there who have been there over the last the whole time, maybe they'll take a little bit of a confidence from that, perhaps. But like you say, it's gonna be a different kind of Hearts performance, and it has to be a different kind of Hearts performance than what we've seen against Celtic at the weekend there. Because I mean, where'd you even start with that? I mean, I know we'll try not to dwell too much on Celtic, but I mean, the fact, let's face it, Hearts made it very, very easy for them. I thought on Sunday, I thought all the goals were entirely preventable. I thought there wasn't enough risks getting taken on the ball when Hearts did have possession. There was, again, there wasn't much kind of attacking penetration to the last 20 minutes or so. And, if you do that against Rangers at Ibrox, you're going to get beat.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you're right. I think there was concerns from Sunday in terms of in and out of possession. I think a lot of the problems that occurred out of possession, you could attribute some of that to individual errors. I think it's always, when a manager's under so much pressure, it can be so easy to just place everything at the manager's feet. But, if you look at Neuenhof's contribution for the first 2 goals especially, then I'm pretty sure that's not something that's being directed or instructed to the sidelines. I do think that the way that he set up, in particular way, Alex Lowry offering cover for Alex Cochrane down the left was a strange decision. Some people might say bold, I would say stupid. But yeah, in possession as well, it wasn't great. We just weren't brave enough in possession. There wasn't that sort of speed of thought. I know that there isn't a lot of pace within the Hearts team, but what you really need in games against the Old Firm is sort of like speedy thought, so you can't really take that extra touch, and invite that pressure. You need to make sure that you're playing with your head up and that you know what you're going to be doing, probably with your second touch once you've got the ball under control. And I didn't see enough of that on Sunday. Now, again, partly that has to come down to the manager to try and fix. So part of his job is to try and improve players. And I think you've seen enough out of this Hearts squad to suggest that if on form, we could be best of the rest in that league. So now what you need to look at is, well, how do we make them better? I think you've got to look at how we deal with pressure and possession in these types of matches. An example of that. So Stephen Naismith does has a responsibility to try and help with that, but the players are certainly not helping him just now. I think Sunday sort of proved that. It was a really tepid performance. There wasn't really, in terms of press, there was no real cohesion in pressing, which is, there's just no point. If you only see one or two players in the final third pressing, but then there's a huge gap between middle to back three, back third of the pitch, there's no point doing it. Teams like Celtic will just easily sort of just pass through those lines. So that's something they definitely need to rectify with Sunday in mind and go back to how we were performing out of possession prior to Sunday, because our pressing stats and our defensive stats have been reasonably solid up until then. People will obviously argue, well, you've not played the two strongest teams during that spell. Maybe that's why it looked so good, and maybe we're now seeing that. But hopefully on Sunday we can see a return to that. For me, that's the basics. That's what you want to see. If we can get things on top of that, then a bonus. But I just want to see us at least, look resolute and know what we're doing, sort of in terms of our shape when we're having to press the game and when we're out of possession.
But Joe, you're right, because that's a point that Naismith made at his press conference yesterday. He was speaking about the fact that he was saying over the course of the season, defensive stats, things like pressing and all that, like Hearts the teams have been amongst the best in the league. They've actually been really good, but they just totally went away from that on Sunday. Just didn't do it against Celtic at all. Had a big off day, and Naismith described it as the most disappointing performance he's had, from the team since he's taken charge. And I think it's probably hard to disagree with that. I mean, there's other games obviously where, think of the Dundee game or perhaps the Motherwell game or St Mirren where Hearts lost 1-0 and it's, had a lot of the ball, couldn't really do it. That's a frustrating kind of game. I get that, but this was a different, because you're right, it was more it was just a bit meek about the way that the Hearts went about it. But again, and that's another thing as well that Naismith was speaking about. He said that players do need to be a bit braver on the ball, because I think that's one of the big frustrations you touched on. It there is the fact that if you're playing against Celtic and Rangers, you do need to get the ball moving quickly. Like, it doesn't mean get the ball out to a guy who's super fast and just tell him to run. It means don't take 2 or 3 touches to do something that you can only use one. And I think that's the thing. That was a big frustration, particularly during Hearts' build-up play against Celtic. And I think that's something that is definitely going to have to change against Rangers as well. So I guess in terms of the team's shape then for this one, do you think the Hearts switch to a back 3 for this, or does Naismith stick with the back 4?
Well, it's funny, what I would like to see is I would really like to see us try a 3-4-2-1 on Sunday. I know that some people might look at Rangers' shape last night and say, well, they played with a 3, but I think that was born out of necessity. Yilmaz was not included in the European squad, so he couldn't play, and then they had the injury problems with Sterling and Barisic. So I think part of that change of shape last night was brought on by personnel reasons, rather than something that I think Clement will want to implement in the long term. I think if you look at how they set up against Hibs on Saturday, they went with a 4-2-3-1. They played with a bit more width in terms of starting Scott Wright on the right-hand side of the park, and they had Lammers playing more centrally, whereas under Beale, Lammers was being asked to play right, but he was always sort of tucking in. He was always quite close to the sort of number 10 position. So it looks like he wants to be a bit more direct in his style, and I would be a bit concerned if we do go to Ibrox and we do implement a 4 at the back and we kind of just go man for man. I'd like to see us be a bit brave in terms of be proactive with that team selection. And I think if they were to go with 3 at the back, it offers more options to sort of give Rangers questions to sort of try and answer, rather than be all about us sort of reacting to what Rangers do, which can obviously happen quite a lot when you play at Ibrox and Parkhead. So for me, I would go with the 3 at the back, even if there's question marks about Civic maybe within that formation. People prefer to see him maybe play right of a free, or maybe right wing back or right back. I would be tempted to play him as the central figure on Sunday and have him supporting the two central midfielders when we're in possession. I don't think Kent's comfortable enough on the ball to do that. But again, that then brings risks because Seema will be playing out wide left, and I'm not quite sure how Kent would fare in that situation. So it's a difficult thing. But I think for me, I would go with the back three. That's how I would start.
Yeah, no, I think you make a good case for it. And, I mean, Joe said this a lot, Naismith tends to keep us on our toes when we're trying to guess what he's going to go for. He is, I think he's one of those managers where he's got a preferred style of play, but he's not afraid to be pragmatic or, to be reactive when the situation calls for it. So we might well see that. And I guess, one of the things that does go in Hearts' favour is the fact that, like we touched on, they've got a new manager in Rangers, and again, they're probably going to be changing system from what they played on Thursday night in Europe. And you think, there might still be a wee bit of them still clicking into gear, I suppose. They're still not quite fit and firing, or maybe not quite playing the way their manager wants them to. I mean, Naismith was saying that he didn't expect them tactically to change too much from what we've seen so far under Beale, because he says, these things take time. Clement himself has come out and said that he's not going to, completely rip up the drawing board and start again. It's going to be gradual changes that happen over time. So I think that it's going to be a tricky one. I think I'm kind of with you, to be honest. I kind of think a back three. I tend to err on the side of caution with these things anyway. I'd probably go for back three. I'd probably fancy Civic on the wide centre back role, though, just because he's got that pace, he's got that athleticism, and I think he's got really good recovery pace as well. For if Seema, for instance, does dart in behind, I think Civic's exactly the kind of guy who can catch up. I'm assuming then you'd have Offia at right wing back then.
No, I would actually go with Alex Forrest. I think Forrest has enough of a sort of positional discipline about him. I think he can play to instruction, and I think if Naismith was working with him for a week on a certain position, I think albeit he's not a flashy individual, I think he's someone who can at least give a contribution within a system like that over a 90-minute piece.
You mentioned that just because Tom Irving obviously did a piece for us earlier this week where he was looking at players and comparing how they're getting on this season to last season. And the one thing that kind of stood out really about Alan Forrest is this jack of all trades. The guy's like you say, you can play him in right wing, left wing, just off the strike, or even at wing back, and he'll do a job for you. It's like he's quite a steady, reliable performer, I think, in that sense. And that if he's in attacking areas, he can be flashy, he can be attacking at times, but generally he's quite an all-rounder, and he's quite good at just doing what he's told, I suppose. So I could definitely see that. Yeah,
I just think with Ofaya, he maybe in a flat back four, he's fine in that sort of right back position, but he's not shown anything. We tried to play with a sort of a wing back system up at Ross County, and we became very sort of lopsided as a result of Ofaya starting there. Dundee away, he wasn't really able to influence much going forward either. I just think for me, again, it's a bit of a risky one, but I would go with Forrest and try and get as many sort of positive attacking players as we can within still a fairly rigid and solid system, at least so that when we're in possession, we feel like we can maintain possession and retain it for some time. Whereas with Ofaya, I would worry that everything would just go back, and again, it would just fall into that trap of being too safe, which is what happened on Sunday against Celtic.
No, absolutely. I think that's a really good point. I guess you kind of touched on a wee bit there, but one big issue is going to be the fact that obviously Alex Lowry won't be playing this weekend. So, when we talk about, having someone who in the midfield who can get their foot in the ball and be creative. So, who's going to step into that void then, do you think?
So, for me, again, just looking at it in terms of what I would have done with the sort of 3-4-2-1, I'd still have Devlin and Neuenhoff sort of playing in those sort of deeper roles. Because I think if Rangers do go back to the 4-2-3-1 that they had against Hibs at the weekend, and if it's, say, for example, it's Cantwell playing in the 10, Rangers have then got a problem because their number 10's then already outnumbered by our two. So then what do their two sitters do? Let's say it's Lundstrom and Raskin, for example. Do one of them step up? But if you then play two men floating behind a number 9, that then creates a problem for the 2 defensive mids in terms of, well, do we stick or do we go up to help Cantwell? So it creates questions for the opposition. I appreciate Lowry's not going to be available, but for me, I think there's an opportunity to play Shanklin and Boyce in those 2 positions and have 2 players that are comfortable and brave enough to sort of keep the ball and then allow the rest of the team to try and sort of support. So that would have been what I would have went for. Again, I do think Naismith will go 4-2-3-1. I do think we'll go man for man and we'll just try and be resolute. I think that Sunday's performance and the pressure that's ever increasing on Naismith, it will probably lead managers to sometimes go against their own philosophy, and they will just think, well, it's about trying to, just get any sort of positive that we can. And I think he'd be delighted if he could get away on Sunday evening with a 0-0 at this stage. So I do think some of the choices that he will make will be with that in mind. And that sometimes that's not an intentional thing. That can sometimes just come subconsciously through the pressure that he'll undoubtedly be feeling. But for me, I would go with sort of, play your 2 8s there in those sort of sitting positions. Cochrane and Forrest offering that sort of width from the wing back roles, and then I'd have Shanklin and Boyce playing off of Vargas. Because the thing is, if you're asking Suter and Goldson to then have to make a decision on whether they pick up Shanklin and Boyce making those runs across the back 4, then that should present opportunities for Vargas, particularly if Rangers want to maybe press on the game. So that's why I'd like to see it. But again, I fully understand why it's probably more of a pipe dream than something that you could realistically ask for at this stage.
No, you make a compelling case, Scott. You definitely do. You're convincing me, definitely. I think you'll definitely see Vargas kind of leading the line. I think it'll be again that I think even if it's the 4-2-3-1, I think it'll be Shanklin dropping a little bit deeper and Vargas playing a wee bit further up. I would imagine, similar to the way the team lined up against Celtic, just because I think when you are playing Celtic and Rangers, like we know that counter-attacks, quick direct counter-attacks, catching them in transition, that's a quite reliable way you can hurt the Old Firm, particularly in their own ground as well. So I think you do need that pace right at the very tip, and I think that Vargas, he's not he's not got the same kind of explosive pace as somebody like Ginnelly, for instance. I think we all know that he's been a big loss to the team definitely this summer, but I think he can. I think we did see it in flashes at times at Celtic. I think particularly in the first half, early on, there's a few times when Lowry had a couple of decent through balls early on in the first half, and was finding Vargas finding these wee pockets, drifting out wide and then driving into the box. And I think that you need that, particularly again. You look at Goldson, Suter, and they're not the fastest centre halves in the league by any stretch. And that is a way that you can hurt them. And I think that of everything as well, I think Shanklin looked better as well, playing a wee bit deeper. I know that's been a point of contention amongst fans this season about should he be playing up front, should he be playing in that number 10, because a lot of his best performances last season came in the kind of number 10 role, and I'm starting, obviously managed to end his goal drought as well in that game against Celtic. So you think that, I think Shanklin might end up having to pick up a lot of that creative burden that the team's not going to have with Lowry missing, I think. So it will be definitely interesting to see how they get on. Did you watch the Rangers game last night? Did you watch them in Europe?
No, I didn't watch them last night. I did watch their game against Hibs on Saturday.
I think that's probably a better indicator, to be honest, because I'd imagine that's how they're more likely to set up, because it was a very strange game in Europe. It was a very, very weird one last night.
Yeah, they've done the basics well on Saturday. You can tell that, again, like I was saying, there was those small tweaks in terms of putting Scott Wright out in the wide right position and having Lammers play a bit more of a central role. So there was small tweaks, and there was definitely an intent to be a bit more direct in possession. I think under Beale, what was frustrating Rangers fans was that everything seemed really convoluted in terms of trying to play for the back. It just seemed overcomplicated, and it was very sort of passive, particularly in home fixtures where they were trying to deal with teams that sort of adopt that low block. I think Hibs definitely played into their hands. I think that has to be commented on. God bless Nick Montgomery. He's going to see this 4-2-4 through. Kills him, but there is going to be risks to doing that as a new manager at the start because you probably don't have all the players to play within that system. I think you could see it, particularly from a back four perspective. Hibs were really poor on Saturday, so I think there's elements of the Hibs performance you need to kind of throw in as a caveat. Rangers were certainly doing the basics well, but I've seen better Rangers performances and wins at Ibrox. So the 4-0, although it probably still flattered Hibs somewhat, a lot of that was down to their own downfall rather than what Rangers were potentially doing. So there's still an opportunity, like you say, to maybe take some sort of optimism for the fact that they'll still be trying to get used to a slight change in sort of philosophy under a new manager. And it might be that he maybe looks at it on Sunday, goes, I'm maybe going to try something a little bit different to see if it works, or I'm maybe going to try a player in a position that's maybe a bit alien to him. So it'll be interesting to see if Rangers do that. And anything that they do that maybe, knocks them out of balance is only hopefully going to be a positive for us at our end.
Oh, I think so. Because, the thing that really stood out in the Sparta Prague game was that, for the first 60, 70 minutes, it was one-way traffic. It was Sparta Prague were all over them. You kind of thought, it's a matter of when, not if, they're going to take the lead. But then the last 20 minutes or so, Rangers absolutely battered them, and they were unlucky not to get a goal themselves. So it was a really strange performance. It's hard to really know quite what to make of it. Obviously, it's a completely different scenario on Sunday with Rangers playing at home, and it's not in a tricky European game, but it was a game where they had to put quite a lot into it, I think, and hopefully traveling and like you say, they've got some injuries throughout their squad as well, so there's going to be some areas of that team where players are going to have to be playing, racking up quite a lot of minutes in quite a short space of time, and so you think Hearts are going to have to try and take advantage of that by being quite energetic both on and off the ball, make Rangers work. And I think that's another thing that Naismith was talking about, the fact you need to make the opposition work as hard as the Hearts work when they're playing the Old Firm, because if you do that, again, they might be tired, they might be that might be an area of the team where you can really exploit it, particularly with them having it playing quite intensely as the game the more the game went on against Sparta Prague. So I think the Hearts definitely do need to do that again. I think what we need to see again, we keep touching on it, but it's getting on the ball, having the ball for a decent amount of time, and just drawing the man, passing it, and just make them really work, and try and tire them out a wee bit. All right, so I'm going to put you on the spot then, Scott. I'm going to go for a score prediction. What are you feeling?
Personally, at this moment in time, I do think it'll be 1 or 2-0 to Rangers. I do think that to a degree, I think you will see an improvement from us out of possession on Sunday. I think we will be a bit more resolute, and I would imagine that that's something that will have been worked on quite extensively this week. Again, my concern just comes from a mentality point of view. Again, we've talked at length about tactics and sort of shaping that today, but ultimately the biggest problem or the biggest hurdle to overcome for teams is mentality when you play Rangers and Celtic, and I think you saw that on Sunday. There was definitely a fear that definitely intensified after the second goal in particular. Players just completely shut down, weren't really willing to take a risk. Then you had some players like Lowry where he just got stuck into this vicious cycle of just trying the hardest pass that he could, and he couldn't get stuck out of that way of thinking. I almost sort of felt sorry for him, because you could see the sort of naivety that comes with being a youngster in that type of performance, and hopefully that's something that he'll learn from for the next time that fixture comes up. But yeah, I can't see past a 1 or 2-0 for Rangers just now, because I don't think a week's long enough to fix those ills in possession. And that isn't just from Sunday. That's growing evidence from all our majority of our games this season. We really have been very tepid in possession. And I'd be very surprised if that gets fixed overnight. And for me, I'm already to a degree starting to have one eye on Wednesday, because I think in terms of Stephen Naismith, the board, and the club's season as a whole, I think Wednesday has a bigger say on how those things are going to progress over the coming weeks and months rather than Sunday. So Wednesday's going to be the one where you're really going to see if any lessons have been learned from that first sort of 9 or 10 fixtures domestically.
No, I think you're right, because let's face it, games against Celtic and Rangers, they're always going to be the favourites. They've got more money, better players, all the rest of it. So I think it's like it's obviously it's not a free pass, obviously not, but it's like expectations are far lower. Whereas the midweek game against Livingston, that's a game where if Hearts have serious ambitions of finishing third, you'd want to see them pick up 3 points in that game. It's as simple as that. It really is. Cool. Right, we'll call it a day there, I think. Just a quick reminder of what we've got on the site at the moment. So this morning we've got Stephen Naismith's Q&A from yesterday's pressers gone up. There'll be one with Toby Sibic coming up later on tonight. That'll go out at 10:30, I believe. We've also got an analysis piece from Tyrone Irving looking at the 8 first-team players who have been kind of regular starters at Hearts this season and last season, and seeing how they've been getting on. We've also got what else have we got on the site? We've got an interview with Joe Savage all about how Hearts recruit. There's a wee bit of an analysis, a bit of a post-mortem on the Celtic game from myself, if you're feeling brave. And then what else have we got this weekend? So we've got the press conference stuff coming up. Myself and Scott will also be doing predicted lineups. So that'll be out either tomorrow or Sunday morning. We've got an exclusive interview coming out as well tomorrow with a former Hearts player. And then, of course, we'll have all our usual match day content on Sunday. We'll have our incident analysis and the post-match press conferences up as well. So just a reminder as well, if you don't subscribe, you can subscribe for £1 for 6 months of access at heartstandard.co.uk/subscribe. And you can, so it's £1 for 6 months of access, or £12 for 12 months if you're feeling a wee bit more confident in this. But I think on that note, we'll call it a day. Again, thank you very much for joining us, Scott, and fingers crossed for Sunday.